Hi guys, today I'm going to review Fire Emblem Fates. Now, I am not necessarily a video game person. That title definitely falls to my brother in this household, but I do really love the Fire Emblem series, specifically Fire Emblem Awakening and Onward, which I know is technically just like 3 games, but still, Fire Emblem Awakening is my favorite game I've ever played, and I really enjoy the series as a narrative. So when I review Fire Emblem Fates today, I'm not going to be talking about mechanics or gameplay so much as story. I'm a writer, and so story is something I know and understand, and so that's really what I would like to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is how the story in Fates didn't exactly work. See, Birthright and Conquest are 2 storylines, 2 timelines in the same universe, and so because of that, I would have expected the 2 to parallel each other more than they did. I wanted each game to echo and rhyme the other, to have narrative elements that were directly parallel to one another. Some of the things I would have changed would have been very simple. For example, I think that in Birthright you should have attained Flora as a part of your party instead of Felicia. You should have visited the Flame Tribe instead of the Ice Tribe, especially because Rinka is a part of your party and it would have just made sense. These are simple, natural opposites that would have paralleled each other and would have created a sense of consistency between the 2 games. Unfortunately, beyond those little details, there are some other inconsistencies that just really don't make sense. I had expected each game to be the same story but different perspectives, a different angle on the same sequence of events. But that's just not what happened. I played Conquest first, so I do have something of a bias against Birthright, but I think there are just elements that did not make sense. In Birthright, Azura is cursed, and her song is cursed, and she can only sing it in the most dire of circumstances to save her friends. In Conquest, she sings it constantly, and there's never any mention of a curse. In fact, you never would have guessed it unless you played Birthright. The same with King Garen's ultimate form. I mean, in Conquest, it makes sense that you find out he's been taken by some sort of demon, which, by the way, is never explained anywhere where this demon came from or what it wanted in the first place. And I get that in Birthright, you're supposed to see Garen as a villain instead of a victim, so that sort of demon exorcism thing just wasn't as relevant and would have sort of upset the natural balance between good and evil. But I still don't understand why the final version of Garen you battle is a slime monster in Conquest and an actual dragon in Birthright. Speaking of dragons, Garen continuously worships this dragon god thing in Conquest, and it's brought up constantly to the point where at the end of the game, when this dragon god is not the end game, I was shocked and I felt cheated. It was just really unsatisfying because it was never dealt with, and it was such a consistent theme that I was sure something was going to come of it. So I figured that when I played Birthright, they would go into depth a little more about that there, like who this demon god was, if he actually existed, because some of the characters seemed to think that Garen was just a fanatic and almost insane, and you know what his motives were and why he had it out for Corrin, but you never get that. And maybe it's in Revelations, but even if it is, that feels almost like a cop-out because Revelations is just an addition to the 2 games. It should provide only extra information that isn't necessary to the plot, not stuff that you simply cannot understand without the game. I did like how Birthright is kind of a backwards conquest, and as far as the order in which you visit different locations, that was pretty satisfying, and it made a lot of sense, of course, because you're going from one place to another. But the 2 games just didn't seem to rhyme or echo each other. They didn't seem to parallel each other at all. It felt like 2 completely separate games with the same characters, when, like I said before, what I much rather would have seen was the same game, or rather the same story, from 2 entirely different perspectives. Another just sort of pet peeve of mine was the amount of character death in Birthright, especially because Conquest was definitely marketed as the darker of the 2 games. And I understand how there's sort of a message about how taking the light path, or you know, even the morally superior path, can have consequences, dire and tragic consequences, and I think that that was an important thing to include. But since, at least in the context of some of the character deaths in Conquest, we know that they didn't actually die in Birthright, and yet that's not dealt with. The whole astral plane thing is dealt with better in Conquest than in Birthright, I think, but it's still not explained fully in Conquest. And I guess that's something I would be okay with seeing more of in Revelations, which I haven't played, by the way. So maybe that's something you see a little bit more of, and I guess that would be satisfying, but I still was left with many questions that I do feel should have been answered within these two games. I want to know more about Azura, and I do feel like you probably get some of that in Revelations, but I would have liked to see it within these two games. I would have liked to understand more about the astral plane and about the invaders and who they are. I mean, I think the ending of Awakening was great, where these sort of demony creatures you've been fighting the whole times are the echoes or shells or whatever of the devoted whose souls were devoured by the dragon. But there is nothing like that in Conquest or Birthright. There is no explanation. And in the end, the ending of Birthright was pretty unsatisfying for me personally. In the end, each game just felt incomplete, and it felt incoherent, and it felt inconsistent with the other game. It felt like each game was taken out of the context of the other, when I think when you're doing games like this, the context of the two should be inexorably linked. You should have a story that is two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same story, two perspectives, but the same universe, the same world, the same timeline of events. That being said, I loved both of these games. I'm going to play them each a million times more. I'm going to buy Revelations. I loved the characters. I felt very attached to them, although more so in Conquest than in Birthright. I would have liked to see Corn bonding with her birth siblings a little more in Birthright, rather. But, you know, that was fine. Definitely by the time I finished each game, I wish I had not finished it. I felt sad and wished that it didn't have to end and that I could play another 10 chapters or so. And these two games are probably going to end up on my favorite games list. But there were unsatisfying aspects of each, and there were thematic elements and elements of story that I felt could have been done better, and it's disappointing to me that a game so driven by story was so unsuccessful in some aspects of it. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Hey everyone, future, or rather present Anneliese here. I'm at VidCon right now, so if you see me, please come say hi. Not sure how many of you watching are at VidCon, but seriously, if you see me, I'd love to go and talk to you. Alright, see ya!
Yes, Anneliese, Conquest does not rhyme with birthright.
Hilarious. Shut up.